Hello and welcome to Pickleball Therapy, the podcast dedicated to your pickleball improvement. This week we are reviving a prior episode that most of you missed. So we are going to revive it this week. It has to do with bad advice, getting bad advice. It happens. Players don't mean to do it, but they give it to us. And in this week's episode, we're going to address one of the most pernicious forms of bad advice that players get out there and that really derails their game. And then at the end in the riff, we're going to share with you some tips on how to spot bad advice, how to avoid it so that you can avoid it affecting your game in the future. Let's jump into the podcast.
Pickleball, like life, has inflection points. Those times when the light bulbs just go on and you see everything better. It's the same with pickleball. Sometimes those light bulbs will go on and you're going to play better. If you're ready to turn on the lights of pickleball, join us inside the pickleball system. Class is open for registration. It's only a limited amount of time. I don't know when you're listening to the podcast, so I can't tell you exactly when, but it's pretty soon. I'm going to put a link below. Go to thepickleballsystem.com and join us for our next class. Let CJ and I show you how to turn on the lights. We'll see you in class. All right, let's talk about advice and some bad advice that we've gotten along the way. If you play pickleball, probably learned it at a recreation center or your local facility. You went out one day, perhaps with some friends, perhaps with strangers, and just started playing pickleball. And so while you're playing pickleball, you have everybody there telling you different things about the game. Some of it's good and helpful because you need to know, for instance, about standing at the non-volley zone line when you're the non-returner. That's helpful to know. You need to know how to score. That's helpful to know. You need to know how to move left to right after you served and scored a point. You need to know how to move front and back when you're the return team and they're serving to the other side. All those types of things. Some advice is obviously not just necessary or good. It's vital to learning the game. So that's certainly a good thing. What happens though is that in that advice that we received when we first started playing pickleball, there are nuggets of wisdom, and I put that in quotes, air quotes, nuggets of wisdom that are imparted to us by the elders of the game. This is a game that's passed down like lore, like folklore, right? And so they give you these nuggets of wisdom that, and they mean well. They mean to give you the information that as they understand the game. And so they're doing the best they can to impart that knowledge to you. Sometimes these little nuggets are bad advice, and they actually can be detrimental, not just in the moment. So it's not just a momentary thing where, that piece of advice maybe led you astray for the moment. It can actually derail you on your pickleball journey. And we're going to talk about one specific today. We're going to talk about the myth or the bad advice about rushing to the non-volley zone when you're on the serve team. So the third shot's hit, and you're just supposed to put your head down and charge up to the non-volley zone like a bull in a china shop. And we're going to talk a little bit more today about how that's not the correct thing to do and perhaps what a better approach would be to that. Real briefly, before we get further into this, if you have a piece of bad advice that you've received over the years, we'd love to hear it. We want to know what sort of bad advice have you gotten over the year. We're basically compiling a list of bad advice that players have gotten, and then we're going to be answering in these podcasts and videos and other presentations. So we're going to be answering these pieces of advice that shouldn't be given or bad advice that are given. If you want to share it with us, please do. Send it to CJ or Tony at coaching@wearepickleball.com. CJ or Tony at coaching@wearepickleball.com. Let us know what the bad advice you received. And if you can, let us know how it was that you came to learn that advice was not the right advice for you. Let's dive into the advice about rushing up to the non-volley zone line after the third shot is hit when you're on the serve side. Obviously, we want to play up at the non-volley zone line as much as possible. That is how you win more pickleball rallies than not. So the underlying premise of getting up to the non-volley zone line is a sound one. We do want to be at the non-volley zone line. The problem with that advice is the mechanism or the manner in which you are instructed to get up there. It's basically get up to the non-volley zone line at all costs. No matter what happens, you just run up. That is where you run into problems by moving forward without thinking or without adjusting for the type of third shot that got hit. Now, to be clear, I've mentioned this already, but to be clear, we are talking specifically or speaking specifically about a serve side concept. When you're on the return side of the game, you definitely want to make it to the non-volley zone line after your return of serve. The difference is that when you return serve, you don't have to wait for the ball to bounce another time. So the two bounce rule, it's already bounced the one time on your side. Once you hit that return of serve, you are allowed to run all the way up. The serve team, because of the two bounce rule, obviously has to stay back, or it should stay back, in order to wait to see where the ball is going to bounce and which side it's going to go to, and then execute the third shot. So the serve team is the one that has to stay back and kind of wait and see what happens with the third shot before they move forward. And that's where the error happens with running up to the non-volley zone line. And to be clear, the movement up to the non-volley zone line by the serve team, so the movement up after the third shot has been hit, or the fifth shot, or the seventh shot, is probably the hardest aspect of pickleball. Learning how to move up to the non-volley zone line, learning how to work through that transition zone, or no man's land it's called sometimes, that is clearly the hardest part of the game. And so to take a very complex, difficult part of the game and boil it down to just get up to the non-volley zone line just doesn't do a great service and can be counterproductive. And the reason it's counterproductive is if you're doing that, if you're running up to the non-volley zone line sort of blindly, or like a bull in a china shop after the third shot, most of the times in rec play and 4-0 and under 4-0 play, I should say, the third shots are usually not fantastic, meaning there's a reasonably high chance that the third shot is going to be an attackable third shot. If an attackable third shot gets hit and you're running into the non-volley zone line, all that's going to happen is you're just going to get hit or passed with the ball on a slam by your opponents, clearly not how you want the rally to end. If, on the other hand, the third shot is attackable, and instead of just running forward, you stop where you're at or stay back towards the baseline and set up a better defensive perimeter, you're going to have a chance to hit a fifth and a seventh and a ninth and work your way up to the non-volley zone line. If you watch the pros play, do they run up to the non-volley zone line sooner than the average bear? Yes. Why? Because their partner usually is another pro, and their pro partner usually is hitting their third shots at an unattackable rate that's pretty good. So they can move up more freely than non-pro players can, or certainly better than, or more. They can move up more easily than rec players normally can, because the third shots are going to be higher quality and less attackable. But you will notice that even the pros, when they see a third shot that is not executed properly, their partner's in trouble, it's a really deep return, it looks like they pulled off the court a little bit, they're struggling to hit the third shot, you won't see the partner of most pros simply run forward and get hit with the ball. They don't like getting hit with the ball. Hopefully you don't either. What they'll do is they'll stay back, they'll form a defensive perimeter, and then that'll allow them to set themselves up to move up on a better ball. So what do you want to do then? What's a better approach than just running forward? The better approach running forward is to wait and see what type of third shot gets hit by you or by your partner, whoever's hitting the third shot. What you want to do is let's make it easy and say you're not hitting the third shot. So you're standing there and your partner is hitting the third shot. You're near the baseline. Maybe you took a step in, which is fine. What you're going to do is you're going to look over at your partner and you're going to watch the third shot your partner's hitting. If your partner hits a third shot that looks to you to be a good third shot, what that means is a third shot that will likely be unattackable. You might think it's going to hit the net. If it's going to hit the net, still move forward. If you think it's going to be unattackable, it looks pretty good to you, then move forward. If it looks like the ball has too much energy behind it, meaning it's going too deep and it's going to probably be attackable by the opponents, then you want to hold your ground. Think about it, if you want to think about it in terms of lights, you can think about it like a yellow light. So when you're on the serve side, you're going to have a yellow light on your side, which basically means, I do want to move, right? And a yellow light, like in a traffic light, a yellow light, you can go through the intersection. You just do it with caution. Same thing here. What you're going to do is you're going to be watching for the third shot, whether you're hitting it or your partner's hitting it. And then you're going to say, that looks good, I can move up. Doesn't look good, I stay where I'm at. It's different than when you're on the return side. On the return side, you're going to flip the light will now become green. So you're going to flip your switch from yellow to green, meaning as soon as you hit that return of serve, you have a green light. So there's nothing to think about. You just move forward. Serve side yellow, return side green. The reason why this bad advice about running up to the kitchen line can be so potentially damaging or delaying for a pickleball player's improvement is because what it does is it makes the player focus too much on the shot and not enough on their movement. What I mean by that is when we start playing, if we have to rush up to the non-volley zone every time or the kitchen line every single time and we get slammed, then what we're upset about or we're focusing on is that was a high third shot. Third shot was too attackable, too deep, got slammed. That's why, I got slammed, right? And so what we end up spending our time on is trying to perfect the third shot, which is a difficult shot to perfect. An easier thing to fix when you're getting slammed by balls on the serve side, in other words, when you're running forward, is not to run forward. It's to stay back a little more, set up a better shot, and then move in on a better shot. So what happens is players will focus too much on the shot, not enough on their movement, because they think the movement is taken care of by this rule that you just run in, run in, run in. You do, in fact, want to get up to the non-volley zone line, so you do want to move forward to the non-volley zone line when you're on the serve. That's a critical part of the game, and I'll link below to a video on basically not rushing forward, on neutralizing and then attacking, those types of concepts, so you can get a better sense of that. And if you want to learn more about how to play the game, with the proper steps and things like that, I highly recommend that you visit us at VI Pickleball. You can come to wearepickleball.com and check it out. But basically, you do want to move forward, but you want to move forward in the proper fashion. And this advice that you just run up all the time, no matter what, it undermines your ability to learn that part of the game, which is a critical part to improving as a pickleball player. Hopefully, if this is the advice that you're operating under, that you rush up to the non-volley zone line, you will stop operating under that bad advice and understand a little bit better about why it is that you want to move up in a proper manner. Also, if you hear a player get told this, when you're playing out there, maybe pull the player aside later and suggest to them there's another way of looking at it. You're welcome to explain it to them if you feel comfortable. If you're not, give them a link to this podcast, have them listen to it, and maybe they'll understand that rushing up to the non-volley zone line is going to be detrimental to the game in the short term and, more damagingly, in the long term. In the riff, I'm going to give you some suggestions on how to identify bad advice when you get it. So if you want to listen to that, stay tuned for the riff. If you or someone you know is looking to get into pickleball, we have the solution for you. We have an entire Getting Started series that is designed for beginners and new players just getting into the game. It includes how to find places to play, the gear you need, and some tips to get you out on the court. I'll link below to the entire Getting Started series. Check it out, and we'll see you out on the courts. All right, so let's talk for a few minutes about how to recognize bad advice. How do you know that when a player is telling you something at the courts that maybe it's something you should take with a grain of salt, or at least maybe think about some more, or put in the back of your mind, say, well, let me check that out later and I'll come back to it. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how you're going to do that. The first one I'm going to tell you is basically, are they explaining to you why? In other words, are they giving you the why for whatever it is that they're trying to tell you to do? If you'll note that if in Into Pickle videos, in Better Pickleball videos, and certainly in VI Pickleball, we generally or always actually try to explain the why of the thing. We think it's really important for you to understand the why. We suggest a certain thing, whether it's getting up to the non-volley zone line and locking it down, not stepping back on force shots, all the sorts of things that we try and explain to you to help you improve as a pickleball player. We try and explain to you the why for that. So a lot of times what you'll find in rec play is you'll hear something like forehand in the middle. And then when you say why, they'll simply, it may say something like, well, the forehand's stronger, which a lot of times isn't the case because the backhand can be stronger. It's also not the case that the forehand's stronger in that position because of the trajectory of the ball and things like that. So you have to be really kind of careful if they cannot explain the why. Same thing with getting up to the non-volley zone line we talked about earlier. A lot of times you'll hear that being said out there, but players can't really articulate the reason for that, simply rushing up to the non-volley zone line or the kitchen line. So if they're not a why, maybe kind of think about it, put it in the back of your mind and check it out later. And you can check out sources like Into Pickle, Better Pickleball, VA Pickleball to validate that information. And then the other way you can look at it is it working? Is it something that seems to work? And I'm not talking about the occasional shot that works. So, somebody hits the fancy, kick out serve and it's an ace and everybody's excited. Watch it and see if that works over and over again. If it works over and over again, maybe think about it, right? Maybe that might be something I want to look at. But if it's something that's just, a once in a while kind of a thing, or it's something like rushing up to the non-volley zone line where you're just repeatedly getting slammed with a ball, maybe ask yourself, is that really what I want to be doing? If I want to be doing something that's anything, whatever it is, that's putting me in a position where I'm just getting hammered with balls over and over again, might not be what you want to do. So take a look at the results of it. We generally don't try to be results oriented in what we do. We're process oriented when we teach. But there are situations where the results will tell you that the process is wrong if you're not able to identify that the process is wrong in and of itself. So usually we focus on process, but in this situation, when you're getting advice from someone at a club or something like that, watch for the results of that type of shot or that type of strategy and see if it works repeatedly. And if it doesn't, then maybe again, put it off to the side and seek to validate it through someone like Into Pickle or Better Pickleball or somebody like that, who you know is a trusted source of pickleball knowledge. So,
hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Don't forget, if you've gotten bad advice, we'd love to hear from you. You can put it in the comments to this podcast episode. I put it in there as a question. Should show up in most podcast platforms. Otherwise, you can always send us an email, coaching@wearepickleball.com. Let us know, what kind of bad advice are you hearing out there? Because we want to help you, as well as other players who are getting that advice, avoid its effects on your game. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, please give it a rate and review and share it with your friends. If you enjoyed the podcast, they probably will too. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.